And Rice advocate Siposetu Mantula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs in UNISA joins me now. Good evening and welcome to you. It's another terrifying human tragedy on the African continent, Sipo. A country devastated by a 6-year war and now scrambling to search and rescue with thousands affected and aid agencies inundated. What's your take on this?
Good evening and Jambo Africa to your viewer, Sister Imam. I think this is very sad. Even if we look at that today in the eastern part of this continent, it is a new year, or what you call the leap year. You look at North Africa, what it is going through now, both Morocco and Libya having catastrophe of cyclones and the tremors that are hitting those north parts of the African continent. But Imam, let's look back. If you look at the Africa Climate Change Summit that was in Kenya just recently, they looked at the issues of flooding, famine in Africa. How will Africa respond to these issues of flooding as well as famine? Because whenever you have flooding, you'll always have a crisis of people having now lack of food, water, communication, all those basic needs. But also look at this month and the coming month. You have 2 international climate summits that are coming, both at the UN and at the one that we also know as the COP28. And the COP28, coincidentally, it goes to the Arab states. It will be hosted by Dubai. And if one looks at the challenges also is of the infrastructure that has been lacking in the eastern part since 2011. But also I think we are not saying something that, but tracking and tracing this cyclone, Daniel, it is from Greece. If you look at Greece, Turkey, they had the cyclone 8 days ago on the 4th of this month. And only now we see both Libya and Egypt facing this challenge of this cyclone. It also reminds us of what happened in 2019, if you recall, in the Southern Hemisphere with the cyclone Idai in the Southern Africa. The measure of response, whether from the regional bodies, from the AU, then you find that it is the UN that also tells us of the medical supplies, about the issue of the assistance that has to come from the West. It is important also maybe for the Arab nations to start to ground towards the African continent, because we have African migrants also, both in Morocco and Libya, who are also affected by this challenge.
Very interesting perspective, and you referenced those 2 climate events on the African continent, Africa Climate Week and the African Climate Summit. I wonder how much of this catastrophe, Sipo, in your view, has a political dimension. We can, talk about concerns over this decade-long power struggle between political rivals in Libya. You talked about early warning systems, and if they were firmly in place, perhaps the preparation for this event could have in some ways mitigated the enormous loss of life and damage that we have seen. Are the 2 connected?
Correctly, absolutely. We can say we might be talking the politics of the weather, the politics of nature here, but I think also the issue of infrastructure, like I've mentioned, that the lack and the neglect of the eastern part, hence the West, the General Khalif Haftar this morning talking about that they need to now unite, they need to now assist the eastern part of Libya. Yes, the issues also around member states, the AU, the regional bodies, when they go to these climate summits, do they also look at the after effects? Do also look at what you have just mentioned, the early warning system, when they knew that there was this blockage or this ozone layer that was moving in Greece? How will Libya respond to that? Considering also that you have a country that it is not having a proper government. At the same time, you have the UN that has been mediating and the AU. So the issues of climate change, I think those are the politics that academics will shy away from, but they are part of the SDGs, they are part of Africa development growth. If one has to look that we cannot talk of growth development if we don't look at the after effects of climate change, and at the same time we look at the push and the pull factors that in some instance is it the man-made cyclones, or at the same time is it the natural cyclones? We have to be critical in our analysis.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, this sort of adage during BRICS when we looked at the impact of climate change, and it just strikes me, developing countries spend the money, but Africa picks up the bill. because we bear a disproportionate brunt of decisions that are not made on the African continent, but certainly reaping the unhappy rewards of climate change. Let's just quickly go to this one before we end our talk tonight. Neighboring countries rallying with humanitarian support. What should the African Union and other agencies on the continent be doing in this moment to help not only Libya, but of course what's just transpired in Morocco as well?
I think what is important, it is for the Arab nations, the Arab League to can respond, and which they have, because you have Algeria that have come to the rescue. You have Egypt that, like I said, it is affected also by the cyclone Daniel. And then you have the AU that issue media statements. But I think it goes back to the AU to look at this Agenda 2063 to say how we're going to respond to this climate changes that we are seeing in the African continent. And hence we said the UN, the EU, they are all coming forth, but it is important for us to work on a long-term solutions in these issues that affects the North African countries as well as the Sahel region and West Africa and the Southern Africa, because all these issues, they are interlinked. And that's where the issue of humanitarian aid, it is critical, it is important, it should not be politicized, and it should come to the rescue of the survivors and the victims.